Good vibrations.
It's episode 198, and we're crossing over to Mexico today to speak again with Charlie Freak of Freak Sense TV. Welcome back, brother.
Hi, Mark. Pleasure to be back with you, and so much going on in the world, hey?
Yep, you could say that. We did our 4 epic shows together last year, of course. Many of my listeners will be familiar with you from those shows. Today, we're not going to be talking about any of the stuff that we were on those shows, but we are going back to the subject matter that you first contacted me about around 2016, 2017, I think it was, in those pre-COVID days, because unlike many of these commentators on current times, you all know Johnny Come Lately that just popped up out of nowhere in 2020. You've got a history. And we go back to around about 2016, 2017, as I say, when you first reached out to me. And we did have a few conversations about all this stuff before the scamdemic and associated subjects took everything over. So it's the amazing spiritual and metaphysical truths which appear to have been ingeniously encoded into rock music lyrics in decades past. And the reason I wanted to speak to you about it now is because these messages are going to form the parting note on which I'll be leaving my upcoming Musical Truth Volume 3. I'm capping off the trilogy, and I wanted to go out with some amazing, mind-blowing information. So after exposing so much doom and darkness as my books have, I really want to leave readers on an inspiring and uplifting note. And things don't really get any more inspiring and uplifting than what we're talking about here, do they?
No, they really don't. And I want to just remind all of the listeners, because your audience has continued to grow and grow and grow, and a lot of them may not have been there for our first shows we did together. But in the beginning, when I approached Mark, I said to Mark that you know, Colleen and I just feel like part of this sacred journey that we're on is a huge part of this is to reveal that all of the symbology that Mark was decoding in Musical Truth Volume 1 at that point, which is still to this day such an amazing book as is Volume 2. And so important because Mark is showing you the truth of how the Cabal took what existed and, like everything else, has turned it upside down. Remember, the Cabal are the Canaanites, and they're the left brain. And the left brain, that dime brain, facts, figures, and logic, has no creativity. It has no capacity for creation. It is a robber. It is a robber baron, a stealer. And what it does, it then perverts and ultimately flips these symbols and numbers. Everything is God's creation. That their original etymologies are divine, and that what they've been turned into was horrific. And you know, to Mark's unending credit, he took a hard listen to what we were sharing with him. And then he saw the light in what we were saying. And remember, Mark's product at that point, because Mark at that point was still at like 8,000 subscribers. YouTube always has where you hit 9,000 and then they don't let you pass until some miracle occurs.
I was on 9K for the longest time.
For the longest time, and then it's 50,000. And it's probably a lot more than that, but
for sure.
1,000 forever. So
I get 50,000 emails a day, so it's got to be more than that.
Exactly. So Mark's credit, his product was saying that all of the symbology and numerology was very, very dark, and they were using it for these purposes, which is true and very important. But what we just said is that, hey, it comes from God's creation, and that at the beginnings of it, the basis to it is all perfectly beautiful and divine. And so Mark's product was Musical Truth Volume 1, working on 2, but he did those shows at the risk of potentially confusing some of his audience and potentially risking losing some of his audience. But that's the kind of person that Mark Devlin is. Mark is someone that is truth first, and he'll go where the truth takes him. So to that end, we're eternally grateful to Mark, and of course I know all of your viewership and audiences as well, because during these very, very dark times, you have been a real strength, which is what people have needed. So I just wanted to start with that and just remind everyone that Mark took a big chance by giving Colleen and I actually our first sort of larger audience to what we were doing. And the rest, I guess, as they say, is history. And those 4 shows that we did last year, I'll just reiterate to everyone, every single word is true. And when it all plays out is up to somebody other than myself, but it will play out. And when it does, you will remember that those shows were done on Mark's channel and with a combination of Mark, Colleen, and I. So a lot of great moments with each other, and it's going to be fun today.
And as and when these great reveals happen, and the proof is there, I'll be the first to put my hands up and say, I should have had more patience. I should have had more faith. But in the meantime, I'm just like John Lennon. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. That's all I'm about. That's all I've ever wanted. That's all I ever seek. That's all that's important to me. So you did a series of 150 mini books a few years back now, examining what you consider to be the most essential albums that everyone should listen to at least once in their lives. And more recently on your Rumble channel, you've been breaking down and dissecting some specific songs from some of these albums. So could you summarize what the amazing, empowering information is that these artists were communicating? I mean, they all expressed it in their own individual ways, but it's ultimately the same knowledge, the same teachings at the end of the day, isn't it? Is there any easy way of summarizing and précising what these artists were trying to communicate?
Yeah, there really is. Ultimately, what we teach, what we've taught for 4 years now, is 5 years, I guess. But what we've taught is that there's, and this you learn this by studying the etymology. Etymology is the true root of all of these words that we have in our language, and virtually all of them now have been twisted upside down. Just take quick example is the word fine, which is divine, which is to fly to heaven on gossamer wings, silk thread, the finest, most beautiful, but strongest truth, structure, strength that takes you to heaven. And today in our world, a fine is something that the police give you if you've made a mistake and broken one of their policy officer rules. And or of course in today's world it's, well, that was okay. And it isn't. Fine is divine. Fine is meant to be the highest compliment that you can give something, and of course they have turned it into either a ticket for not obeying the rules, or it was just okay. And they're liars, they're assholes, and that's what they've done to us. They've lied to us about absolutely everything. So that's a quick good example. So at the heart of everything is one story, and this is why you see it in Nintendo games, Super Mario Brothers. It's the one story. It's why you see it in movies. Virtually most or all Hollywood movies just follow the theme of the one story, which is that there is a hero who doesn't really know too much about himself, and that this hero has to go on this journey. Ultimately, he rescues a damsel in distress. He has to slay a dragon, and then the damsel takes him on a journey upwards to the top of a castle and to bring her home to her king, her husband, her lord, her mate, whatever. And this is that one story that Mark and I have done many, many, many shows together on, which is true human physiology. So this is the story of the chrism oil, which is the essence of us. This is the raising of Jesus Christ within us, Christ consciousness, from the bowels, which is the root Muladhara chakra, all the way up to the third eye chakra, which is Ajna, and then that illuminates the crown chakra, which is the Sahasrara. And that is the purpose of why we're here. If you wanna debate that, fight that, argue that, that's up to you. You're just wasting time. You will go around and around and around the wheel until such time that you begin to see that you are the light of the world, that you have a sacred journey to do, And until you do it, you'll go around and around and around the samsara, because this is what we're here for. And there's no way to get out of this. You eventually will have to make this journey. And it all starts with the leap of faith, where you get out of hell. You get out of your left brain by jumping blindly across the horizontal divide into your right brain. And you see that in all these movies. And again, Indiana Jones as well, when he was searching for the Holy Grail and had to save his father, and you have to take the leap of faith. It's encoded in everything. It's Professor Tolkien. It's the Lord of the Rings entirely. It's a book that I'll eventually get to and write. It's C.S. Lewis with the Chronicles of Narnia. And of course, it's found its home in rock and roll music. And the truth of rock and roll music is this: it isn't rock and roll music, it's roll the rock music. And if you watch the shows that Mark and I have done with regard to raising the chrism oil and illuminating the pineal gland, then you know that when the pineal gland illuminates, it sends a signal via the stria pinealis to the fornix. The fornix is in the third ventricle of your brain, which is that centermost, innermost part of your head. And in that third ventricle, the final chamber up and to the right, the highest point in your head, is known as the chamber of the bridegroom, bride and groom, father and mother. And only we can create what is known as this alchemical marriage. And so when we do the work, when we raise Jesus Christ within us by living, but literally living the teachings of Jesus Christ, embodying him in every decision that we make in our life, then we illuminate that Christ consciousness within us, that chrism oil back home. That's putting oil in your lamp. Then the fornix is, the symbology cannot be missed. This is, and you can check this in Gray's Anatomy, all of the medical encyclopedias. It's all there. All of these chambers and the fornix. The fornix is attached to the roof of the third ventricle of your brain, but below it's not attached to anything. It's just hanging loose. But it's a barrier. It's a rock. It's a round rock that has been rolled, blocking the tomb, blocking the final chamber of our brain, which is the chamber of the bridegroom. And only by activating the pineal gland does an electric signal is sent, and it rolls the rock. It rolls. This is what all ancient cultures, the Gnostics, the Essenes, the Gnostics, the Knights Templar, the true Masons, the true good Freemasons, they encoded all of this, and it's called rolling the rock, and it's the only way. It's what we must do. This is bringing the family home together, and then it's father, mother, child, and then we witness the marriage between the father and the mother, and that would be Father in heaven and Mother earth, and together they are reunited, and we become the family once more. And so this is why we become Jehovah's Witness, because somebody has to witness the marriage for it to be lawful. And that's why we are the best man at the wedding, because only the best man can make this journey to heaven within your head. That's the symbology, and this is a sacred journey. So this story is so amazing. Mark and I have done a couple of shows on it. I've done literally 100 shows with various people explaining this process to them. It is what every ancient culture exalted. It is the one story. And so when you have a group of people through the freaks of the 50s, okay, so these are what we like to now just think of as the beatniks in their little cafes drinking espresso and writing poetry. The freaks of the 50s became the hippies of the 60s. And I just did a live show with Colleen, Justin, Eugene the other night about the truth of the hippies and the 1960s. And just prior to that, we did a show on the truth of the Freemasons and the Knights Templar, because what you're looking at now with the Freemasons is not what the Freemasons were in the beginning. It has been completely hijacked. It has been completely evil. So to say now that Freemasons are essentially entirely evil and a lot of the things that they've done encoded are encoding evil is correct, but that's not how it started. It's as with everything with the Cabal, they hijack and then they pervert and then they twist upside down. So essentially, Mark, to make it so simple for everyone, it's this. It's the one story that is God's story. It is the one story of Jesus Christ. It is this one truth that is in the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddha Sutras. It's in all ancient scriptures. Is this one story of raising the Christed energy within us. And when a group of young men and women had this incredible opportunity to take the tonal fruition of their desire and passion within them and turn it into rock and roll music, so many saw their chance to teach these encodings. And so, you sort of look at this and you say, well, how did you find out? And why do so few people know this? Well, because it's the last 110 years that we've been lied to. And it's the last 110 years since Einstein and the theories of special and then general relativity that have turned the world upside down to what the truth is. But this sacred knowledge has been kept alive, and once you know it, it becomes your life, because it's everything. It's pure passion. It's purple rain. And then these people teach more people, just like we've been teaching so many, and so many that we've taught are now teaching others about this incredible one story, the truth of God, the truth of Jesus Christ. I mean, it's incredible stuff. And so these young men and women came to dominate rock and roll during the 1960s. And this is the war, Mark knows this, absolutely, we've talked about it on many shows, but this is the war that occurred in rock in the 1970s before they took full control back over the industry in 1982. And then from 1983 on, rock and roll has just become shit. And then now they got rid of it for virtually everything else. But they had a real battle on their hands because these righteous kids, these righteous men and women were all singing and telling. And I mean, we're not talking about one or two bands or 30 or 40%. We're talking about the vast majority of the most popular rock bands were all writing songs about God and Jesus Christ. They were all writing about the raising of the Chrism wall in one form or another. And on our channel, I'm doing it on Colleen's YouTube channel for the animals, the Shire Animal Rescue Sanctuary channel, and then also on my Rumble channel. I think we're at about 100 of the top 1,000, and I'll get them all done.
Is that what you have to do to stay on YouTube? You've got to have an animal sanctuary channel to be able to stay on that goddamn platform.
Well, they won't let me on. I've been shut down off of everything. So all I've had, Mark, since January 6th is Rumble. And then we're on MeWe, a little account, and they block us all the time on MeWe too. So it's ridiculous but that's essentially what YouTube will allow Colleen and I to put out is these rock songs that are deeply encoding this music. And the comments, Mark, that we're getting on each of these videos are incredible because everyone is virtually that comes in contact with them are saying that you're changing my life. I was at a point where I just felt everything was a lie, and that all of these 60s and 70s rock artists were evil, and that I loved that music, and that was a huge part of my life, and it was taken away. And now you're coming along and you're saying, no, this is the highest high. And you're giving me a huge part of my life back, and more than that, you're giving me joy, passion, and hope back in my life. And so, to hear that one time is amazing. To hear it literally tens of thousands of times is incredible. That we've been able to be of this service. So it's so fun to do this, Mark, because growing up, I hated school. I loved books, and I loved my roll the rock music. So just to clarify, and I'll pass it back to you, is this. Rock and roll music, when it started, wasn't rock and roll music. It was roll the rock music. And all of these bands from Buffalo Springfield, and then Crosby, Stills, Nash, Neil Young, and Joni Mitchell, and all the way through George Harrison, John Lennon, that influenced so many into all the most popular bands of the 70s, Led Zeppelin, Boston, Journey, Earth, Wind and Fire, Steely Dan, the Doobie Brothers. I mean, it's everywhere. All of these bands were just writing non-stop songs about this one story, and it's called Roll the Rock, because the one story is to raise Jesus Christ within you back home to the mother and the father. And to do that, you have to roll the fornix, and that is known forever as rolling the rock. So rock and roll, and in its heyday, was roll the rock, and now it's become rock and roll. So this is, once again, what you see, 180-degree perversion of the truth, of the beauty, of the genius of our Creator God and our Sacred Mother Mary, and this is the perversion back into the darkness again.
What else would you expect from these sick demonic fucks, right? But they're going down. They're going down. Yep. Anyway, we did address this question when we spoke about this stuff a few years ago. It certainly warrants revisiting, and you referenced it there. So a lot of my work has involved exposing many of these household name musicians for the system-serving lifetime actors that they really are. And haven't so many of them been showing their true colours during COVID? Making their little videos, wear your masks, guys, make sure you're socially distanced, don't have your grand round, and make sure you take the vaccine. They've shown what they really are through this whole thing, haven't they? But you're obviously familiar with the work of Dave McGowan, as am I. He hugely influenced what I'm doing now. And in his book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, he exposed the backgrounds, the family backgrounds and the affiliations of so many of these musicians that came out of that area during those times. And it was military connections for days. And there were connections into Freemasonry, connections into the Pentagon and Yale and Harvard and all these different expressions of the establishment. So many of these artists that you've cited in these rock lyric decodes have a lot of these affiliations. And I think you've always taken a more sympathetic and permissive attitude towards many of these music makers than I have. And you've considered them to be kind of sages, gurus, wise spiritual teachers that were trying to get messages across. Do you still feel that's the case, or do you feel some of them aren't entirely trustworthy? In which case, what would be their real motivation for sharing this empowering information? Or do you think they were all benevolent and well-meaning and just wanted to help uplift humanity?
Yeah, I think from the beginning, it's mostly they were all benevolent, and now they're virtually all demonic. It's sickening, and every genre. I mean, country music, for God's sake, is just filled with satanic fucks. So it's completely turned upside down. But when it started, there were certainly some. There were artists that the Cabal had their clutches into, and all we have to do is just go back and listen to some of the confessions of Robert Johnson, who was at the forefront of converting blues music into these rock chords and making bluesy rock and roll songs, which was championed early on by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Now, that's a great place to start, because the Beatles and the Stones were both groups that were manufactured. And remember, this is all part of the Cabal, so don't kid yourselves. Tavistock is not some independent organization of evil that just conveniently has things in common with MI5 or MI6 or the CIA. They're all one and the same. It's one large plan. So they knew that they were going to take John Kennedy out in '63, so you have to be ready for the aftermath of taking the light of the world away from this youthful generation that had so much hope in their hearts with a man that exhibited and gave so much hope for a peaceful and unified future. So after Kennedy was allegedly assassinated, then you had the rollout of the Beatles, the Stones, and the Mersey beat, the Merseyside sound that came to dominate rock and roll for the next sort of 3 years. And so that's all planned. So there's no doubt about it. I mean, your work, and especially Mike Williams, but your work with Mike has been brilliant, getting into the truth behind the Beatles. Mike eventually did a 3-4 hour epic podcast video on his analysis. Did the Beatles write their early music and stuff? And that was incredible research, because Mike's
amazing piece of work.
It is, and he did such incredible work, and his conclusions are correct. So, and what I was saying to you and Mike at the time is that you can just hear, if you know these musicians enough and you know them moving forward, you can hear a Lennon chord. I know a John Lennon written song, because he writes a certain way, comes from a certain perspective, and it's the same with George Harrison. So what you find is there's a reason why George was only allowed one song or no songs in the beginning, and then only one song or maybe a couple of songs here and there. Is because Harrison was writing his own music, and therefore he was a wild card, and you can't have that when you're attempting to brainwash the world, the youth of the world. So that's why George Harrison, and then that led, of course, in 1970, when Harrison became a free agent of the construct of the Beatles, and then he released that brilliant, in my top 10 of the 150 most important, best and most important rock albums ever, is All Things Shall or Must Pass. The double album. He could have released, and it was a triple album because he had extras, but it could have been a quadruple album, because the Beatles had suppressed so much of George's music. And then you listen to All Things Must Pass, and you go, how the hell did these songs not make it on a Beatles album? But then you listen to the lyrics, and that's why.
You know, I did a couple of talks at the weekend, and I was observing the responses of various musicians to the COVID scamdemic. And I mentioned Paul McCartney, or whoever it is, sorry, Sir Paul, and the way he's been endorsing the vaccine and telling everyone to do what the government says. And then you've got Sir Ringo Starr, recently knighted, and he's behind his drum kit with his mask on, saying, stay at home and wear your mask. And I made the point to the crowd, there's a reason why Paul and Ringo are still alive and John and George aren't.
I'm clapping. Thank you very much. I mean, it's common sense 101. There you go, folks. You toe the line. This is what you get in this fake world. But that's why Fall McCartney and Fall Ringo can't stand themselves, because they're phonies. They're fakes and they're phonies. Literally fakes and phonies. And so they've got all the money in the world. They've got all the puppy dog love in the world for them, but none of it's real. It's all fake, because it's all built on lies. And they're Satanists. They have no God in them. They have no Christed energy within them. And in the end, they'll turn to dust, because they have no truth. That's not a life worth living. So thank you for saying that and sharing that. And how proud must all of us be of someone like Eric Clapton, who was a very, very close friend to George Harrison. And we've all been wondering if Eric has kept himself on the right-hand side of things. I think what happened with his little baby is an indicator that he did. He was on the right side of things. And listen to Eric. There's a lot of these great musicians in Britain and the rest of the world that have come right out and have said, don't you dare put a mask on. Don't you dare listen to authority. You are the divine individual. You have free will. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. You be free. There's a lot of them. And Eric Clapton has been one of those people that has come out and said, you don't need to be wearing your mask. You shouldn't be getting a jab. I got the jab and it almost killed me. So you should be getting the jab. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm giving Eric Clapton and Van Morrison the benefit of the doubt, because it's Sir Van Morrison, but obviously he's come out as well, and he's been very critical of the government's lockdown measures and the whole COVID scam. He's exposed it. He's taken a lot of flack for doing so inevitably, as has Eric. And a few people have said to me, Mark, you specialize in exposing these scumbags, and how can you trust them? And I'm saying, well, from what I'm seeing, Van and Eric appear to be genuine and sincere, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and assuming them to be so until something comes along to convince me otherwise. Because we do need some prominent voices speaking out, and we've got a couple there, and we need to be grateful for that.
Absolutely. And then remember, if you go into their music, if you go into the music of Eric Clapton through the years, and of course Van Morrison, two of the top 150 albums of all time are both from Van Morrison. So Moondance and then his street band, his choir, those two albums from 72, 73, 71, 72 are two of the greatest. And Van Morrison, all he did is he wrote about God and exalting the sacred feminine, and wrote about raising Jesus Christ within ourselves. That's what Van Morrison wrote. And when you look at Eric Clapton, so did Eric Clapton. When he had his confessions, like in Layla, about the sinful things that he did, he's being honest, and that's very important. It's very important. When we make mistakes in life, that's okay. All you have to do to have forgiveness is to simply be open and be forthcoming about the mistakes and the poor choices we made, and you're forgiven if you are. It's when we attempt to hide our sins, it's when we attempt to cover the lies, like someone like Charlie Ward, when you attempt to just hide or obfuscate your massive lies with more lies, then you're just a shill. You're at the end of the day, you're just gray smoke, and eventually you'll peter out and disappear completely, because there's no essence to you. The essence is in goodness. The essence is in helping others. The essence is in being what our namesake is, which is kind man. We're mankind. And that's the answer to everything. Hi, Eugene. Hi. So to slam dunk for Van Morrison and slam dunk for Eric Clapton, look at their songs. Go through and look at the lyrics to their songs. And, one of Eric Clapton, all of his songs, but one of his greatest songs that I'm sure most of your listeners will know right off the top of their head is Let It Rain. Let It Rain is raising Jesus Christ, and then the purple rain from the crown chakra. When you illuminate the sixth chakra, ajna, and that is illuminating the pineal gland, then you create the crown chakra, and that is the purple rain that Prince and America and just all these bands they wrote nonstop about. So Let It Rain by Eric Clapton is entirely about this one story and raising Jesus Christ within you to illuminate the pineal and to wear the purple crown. And this is the rain. And then, it's very interesting, Mark, that during this scamdemic, on YouTube, a lot of these artists that we've been singling out as as writers of divine music, they have been getting together and doing songs from their homes using modern technology to do them together, and it's made for interesting bedfellows. And people were asking Colleen and I, it's kind of weird, right? Like, why is Peter Frampton doing a duet or a mixed song with the Doobie Brothers? I never saw them. I never saw them as sympathetic bands, or they don't seem to have a lot in common musically, and I haven't noticed them doing stuff together. What would bring Peter Frampton and the Doobie Brothers together? And then what song did they do? They did Eric Clapton's Let It Rain. And the reason is because the Doobies just wrote about raising Jesus Christ within you, and Peter Frampton all his songs wrote about raising Jesus Christ within you. So that's the connection. And you just go through this on YouTube, you'll see the oddest bedfellows through 2020 and 2021. And these are people that are sensing the energy is changing. They are sensing that something's not right with the cabal, that Biden clearly is a fake, that clearly something's going on. Maybe it is with this Trump guy, or I don't know, maybe there is a Q or whatever, but they're sensing something that's going on, and they're being bolder, and they're taking more chances And so you're seeing these really, really interesting bedfellows come together. And the unifying factor is that they spent their lives writing about this one story.
And you're seeing some obvious bedfellows coming together as well, like Dave Grohl and Mick Jagger, who made a record together. And they're both celebrity traitors. They're both sellouts. They're both system servers. So what would you expect from those two? But we know that the Cabal likes to adhere to this tenet of placing the truth in plain sight. So they like to communicate the truth of a matter so that we can no longer make the claim that we weren't given an opportunity to know. It's their way of getting themselves off the karmic hook, as I've spoken about many times, this spiritual tenet that they try and weasel and slyly work their way around. Could that be what we've been looking at with some of these songs, communicating these amazing spiritual truths? Could it be the Cabal's way of getting their agents and their assets to put across these truths so that we can't say that we were never given an opportunity to know about them? Or do you feel that's not the case at all?
It is the case in some examples. Remember, when the Cabal puts the truth in plain sight, they put it in plain sight, but you never know when and where. For example, The Simpsons, which is just a cartoon show from this new age 33rd degree Freemason Matt Groening. And they're encoding huge amounts of truth on The Simpsons. Now, who in their right mind would turn on The Simpsons to hear truth, actual truth about what's happening in the world? You wouldn't. So the thing with the Cabal is, and this is, Dave Grohl, absolutely, you're 100% bang on. He is a demonic, satanic asshole of the Cabal. So are the Stones. The Stones, goat head soup. They have shown you in plain sight that they are all demonic entities. This is why who's I should know this, but who's the drummer for the Stones again all those years? Charlie, isn't it?
Charlie Watts recently passed away.
Charlie Watts, yeah. What did he pass away of? Complicated due
Convid,
to
was it?
Convid. That's code. I guarantee you, 100%, not a theory, 100%. When you hear that someone just passed away from complications due to COVID, that's telling you that they've been executed. And all of these fuckers are getting their just desserts. This is what Colleen and I teach. What you choose to do in life is your karmic energy. And John Lennon got it exactly right. It's called instant karma. And these people are attempting to deflect their karma onto another lifetime, and then another lifetime, and another lifetime, another lifetime. So they're attempting to deflect, and that's cheating God. And so God will have the last laugh, and that is that when you commit evil, when you commit sin, and then you don't, and you then try to veil it, then you are going to have your comeuppance. And that's what's happening with all these people. When you hear someone that has just passed away due to complications from COVID, that's code for they've been executed. And nothing, and for some of you, they're going, oh God, geez, I don't think they should have killed this person. Oh my God, they would not have done these things if these people weren't knee deep into the worst possible sins. When you're a Satanist, it means that you are harvesting children. Don't kid yourselves. That's what Satanism is. That's what it always has been. It's what the Zionist protocols attribute essentially everything to. So in the beginning, yes, there have been bands like that. Led Zeppelin has written some of the most, like Stairway to Heaven is an entirely a divine creation, but and a number of their great songs are divine creation.
Page was into some of the dark stuff.
Jimmy
Aleister Crowley and all this.
Absolutely was. He absolutely was. And so a lot of the Stones songs are absolutely demonic. With the Rolling Stones, they're just demonic. They're just pure Satanists. They always have been.
Oh, did you see the tribute video that Paul McCartney did for Charlie Watts? So he recorded a video saying how sorry he was that Charlie had passed away and stuff. But the interesting thing about him is he had big black rings under his eyes in the video. Now, why could that be, I wonder?
Yeah. Well, these people are no longer free. So when they do something like that, they're doing it at the behest of others, and everything is a calm at this point. Everything is a calm at this point. Anything that Paul McCartney is saying or doing at this point, whether you choose to believe it or not, is a powerful calm. So you need to look at these things and take a second and third look at them and listen carefully, because there are calms everywhere. So no, that doesn't surprise me at all. But that's yeah, wow. Paul McCartney saying, "Oh, it's a shame about Charlie Watts." Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
Dead fellows. But let's go back. So Dave McGowan's book and stuff. Remember, McGowan was not a conspiracy theorist. People don't know a lot about Dave McGowan. Dave McGowan disappeared sort of conveniently not long after the book. In the book, Dave McGowan does not go to any extent to really draw any conclusions. He just somehow had access to all this information and put it out there. So more and more and more, while the information is true, or Mark, you wouldn't have seen it, used some of it, and
Dave put in his citations. He showed where he'd got the information from, and it was all drawn from mainstream sources.
That's right, and it's all true in that sense. But there's more to the story. So, for example, with Jim Morrison and Jim Morrison's dad, there is so much about both of those two that has not become public yet. And Jim Morrison is absolutely alive. All of these deaths, every time there's an assassination, so you have to look at JFK. The assassination is a shit show. Nobody has it right, because there's a million different angles to the Kennedy theories and angles to the Kennedy assassination, because it's a shit show. And the assassination of Malcolm X is just riddled with controversies and diametrically opposed eyewitnesses that saw one thing, said another, and it's incredible. And then same thing with Martin Luther King, same thing with Robert Kennedy Jr., same thing with John Lennon. Look at the attack in his home on George Harrison. And you go to the circumstances around Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix and Mama Cass, and you just go through the 27 Club, and everywhere you look, Mark, with all of them, there's just controversy and nothing makes sense. And that's because what we've been told is not true. And in many cases, perhaps all, those people, it's a term and a phrase that Colleen and I use, and I think it's just gone wildfire now. It's being used by everyone. But it comes because we know the works of Ayn Rand really well, and in particular, the Atlas Shrugged trilogy and the creation of John Galt. And what John Galt did is, before they were completely destroyed by organized society, John Galt took or went and spoke to these truly genius individuals who are being used, squeezed, and destroyed by organized society for their demonic, satanic aims. And he took them out to a place called Atlantis until such time that he was ready to reveal this satanic world for being the con that it was, and offer people something better. And that these people in Atlas Shrugged were working in Atlantis, hidden, electromagnetically hidden in Atlantis, working on the new reality moving forward, which was divine and beautiful. And so they were free to create their creation without being attacked by organized society, the Cabal. And so essentially, this is what's been going on. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Absolutely convinced of it. So again, look at Princess Diana. It's a shit show when you look at her assassination. It's a shit show. What happened to Michael Jackson? Everything leading up to it. It's a shit show. Prince, if anyone thinks that as healthy as Prince was and as on fire as Prince was about revealing the truth about the Cabal, that in his purple palace, that he died in his elevator, come on, give your head a shake. Prince is alive. Michael Jackson is alive. Princess Diana is alive. Jim Morrison is alive.
I'd love this to be the case with all of these, but I've not seen any proof or evidence to demonstrate that this is the case. But I would agree with you that each of these instances has been a shit show, and with all of these supposed deaths, there are more unanswered questions than answers, and so many things that don't add up. So absolutely, but in terms of there being a proof that they're still alive, I've yet to see any evidence of that.
That's right. Not yet. The time is not quite, but I assure you, from my heart and soul, I assure you, it is the case. How many of them I don't know, but I know some.
Let me just ask you: is it your personal opinion that Jack Stephen was David Bowie when he appeared on that Sky News clip? Is it your personal opinion that Dave, that guy that's supposed to be a Burns victim who appeared the day after Michael Jackson died, was really Michael Jackson? Do you think these artists appear in these guises to give us that kind of clue for those that can spot it?
Yes, for eyes that can see it. And what that then tells you is that there's an organization that's been around for a long time that is divine. And this is what Colleen and I have asserted from the very beginning when we started with our original 7-part that Mark and Mike Williams were huge parts of, which is Everything is a Lie, Now Would You Like to Hear Some Truth? That's what we started. We started by saying, as evil as all of this is, and it is, and that's why Musical Truth Volumes 1 and 2 are must-read books, because they are showing you how they took fame and fortune and brainwashed entire generations who are then going to have kids. So it's so important. But for as evil as they are, it means that all of us that simply choose God, that simply choose to help one another, that simply realize what we are, which is mankind and womankind, not human beings wearing masks. When you realize that, you realize that we have kicked things up to another level, that we are organized at levels that others can't possibly understand, and that we have to organize behind the scenes. And we have to organize in code, because right now, see, I don't want to turn this into a big thing about Donald Trump or whatever, but this is the thing about people would just say, look, if the NSA has it all, if they've got everything, then when Trump won the election in 2016, on January 17th of 2017, why didn't Trump just come out and go, we have it all, sorry to burst your bubble, but here it is, and here's all of the proof. Things have become so bad. We have been brainwashed for 110 years, and the brainwashing has just been amped up. Every single decade is worse and worse and worse. It's 100-fold worse every decade. So by the time 2017 rolled around, half of America was brainwashed into hating Donald Trump, and they didn't know why. They really didn't know why. That's why 3 days after John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane allegedly went down on July 16 of 1999, on July 19th, Donald Trump was on Larry King Live, and he announced his presidency on that show. And he said, and Larry King's going, so you're going to run for the 2000? He goes, no. He said, I'm not saying when, but I'm just saying that I'm convinced at this point that this country is falling apart, and somebody has to step up and do something about this. So I'm announcing that this is something that I will be pursuing, but I won't say when. Code, big code. And by the way, on the show with Larry King 3 days after, he's reading a letter to Larry King to him, written to him by John F. Kennedy Jr. And he makes the point on the letter that that it was written, that the date on the letter from John F. Kennedy Jr. was a day after, it was July 17th, a day after he supposedly had died. Nobody picked up on it. Larry King didn't pick up on it, and nobody seemed to really pick up. People must have just thought Donald Trump made a mistake, but it's code. So this is what has had to happen, Mark, for the longest time. The average person has been brainwashed to hate the truth. The average person has been brainwashed to hate anyone that the cabal doesn't own and control. And that's why Ringo Starr is a knight and famous. And that's why Paul McCartney is a knight and famous and touted at every single turn and on every single talk show, because they're fucking liars. And those that tell the truth are squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Now, look at the reality in the rock and roll industry today, Mark. These great bands from the 60s who wrote the best music ever can't even make an album today. Why? Because it won't get played. It won't get played on any platform where a younger music buying audience will hear it and then go out and buy it. So the only way that any of these bands can make a record is what Tom Petty was doing. Tom Petty is absolutely alive. Tom Petty is absolutely alive. And I'll just quickly segue. Here's a story about Tom Petty, guaranteeing you. Tom Petty's last album, which was all his albums were genius, but his last album was just incredibly genius, Hypnotic Eye. He released it. For the last 3 albums that Tom did are incredible, but he had to self-release them through his own website, tompetty.com, because Tom Petty couldn't get a record contract. You know, how many records has Tom Petty sold in his life? North of 100 million records, and he can't get a record contract. And so Tom Petty became his own label, and he had to become his own distributor. And he was his own publisher and producer and everything. He had to do it all. So he released those last 3 albums through tompetty.com. And when you purchased the albums directly through tompetty.com, he would always give a bonus track. Now, this is the absolute truth. I want you to breathe deeply and listen to what I'm about to tell you. So on that album, it's not on the album itself, but if you bought it, you got a free download, and the download was to an extra track that Tom gave to anyone who bought it. And I'm just going to quickly check it. Yeah. So, and the name of the track was Playing Dumb. And I'm just going to very quickly read the lyrics to everybody here, okay? And then you'll be able to figure this out yourself. Okay, Tom Petty. This is the last song that Tom Petty ever released before he died at 6 days before his 66th birthday in Malibu as a cajillionaire. So this is what he wrote. The song is called Playing Dumb. Remember, dumb, D-U-M-B, is deep underground military base. Keep that in mind as we go through the song. Got an image of angels, a nun and a man, slapping a ruler across my little boy hand. Now as I turn 60 around, now as I turn around, 60 winters on my head, I'm still throwing up some of that food my mind was fed. Honey, I've had enough. Honey, my time has come. I'm fed up with playing dumb. Well, let's light a candle for every kid, for every soul that was done away with, for every confession that wasn't on the level, flat earth, for every man of God that lives with hidden devils. Honey, I've had enough. Honey, my time has come. I'm fed up with playing dumb. You live in a mansion with drivers and gophers. You walk down the hallway in red leather loafers. This may not be your fault, but man, you are in so deep. How can you know all that you know and still get to sleep? Honey, I've had enough. Honey, my time has come. I'm fed up with playing dumb. Yeah, I'm done with playing dumb. dumb. And that's the last song that Tom Petty wrote. And it's an attack upon organized religion. It's an attack upon the popes and the Catholic Church. And
Red Shoe Club, right?
The Red Shoe Club. And when he says you live in a mansion with drivers and gophers, what's a gopher? Where does a gopher live? And what do gophers do beneath the ground, my friends? They dig tunnels beneath the ground. They dig tunnels beneath the ground. And so now you see why he named the song, his last song ever released, Playing Dumb. Deep underground military bases. Deep underground is the term that's given to these underground cities, these underground realities that these...
So if Tom was revealing all this stuff, you're saying that his death was faked. Now, he would have needed complicity from aspects of military intelligence to be able to pull that off. That's the cooperation of the establishment that he's just exposed. And when we get things like 666 is encoded into his death date, and then you can go back to some of his old videos like Don't Come Around Here No More, which features images from Alice in Wonderland. It's all mind control triggers. See, a skeptic would say, well, Tom's Cabal up to his neck, you know, he's a controlled asset. It's all in his symbolism and in the numbers and all of this. So there seems to be some contradictions there, doesn't there?
Well, to the average person that's not doing the work in terms of knowing Tom Petty's music, if you haven't gone through the breadth of his albums and have seen from the very beginning that he was encoding, and Tom Petty, see, remember, and also you just don't know Tom Petty. If you know anything about Tom Petty, you know that by the time his third album, which was Damn the Torpedoes, Full Steam Ahead, which is very, very significant. That's code on so many levels. Tom Petty, that was a war. That was an all-out war for that album. And if you haven't seen it, there are documentaries about the making of Damn the Torpedoes album by Tom Petty. The reason is that Tom Petty said that the music industry is satanic and they've lied to me about everything. They forced me to sign my contract under duress. He said that they are only saying that they'll promote my album if I do certain things, and these are things I choose not to do. And he said, I'm done doing business with them, and I'm not going to release my album with these demonic people. And so he took it to court and said that his contract was signed under duress. And so during the recording sessions for Damn the Torpedoes, now this became at the time Tom's biggest selling. It's one of the biggest selling albums of all time. It sold, I think it's sold north of 10 million copies now. It sold 3 million copies within just the first 6 months of release. As well, and that's got Refugee and Here Comes My Girl. I mean, like virtually almost every single song was a hit single on that record. And so what Tom did is he was recording that album in secret, and then every single night the album engineer took the master tapes with him and hid them somewhere, and didn't even tell Tom Petty because Tom was in court with the record company, because the record company wanted to keep the masters for that album. They wanted the master reels for Damn the Torpedoes, and Tom said that is not happening. So they if you notice on the album, they went from sort of various studios, because they kept sort of moving the sessions around, because they kept expecting the Cabal to burst in at any moment and attempt to seize the reel-to-reel tapes that were the master recordings for that album. And long and short story of it is that in the end, the court sided with Tom Petty and said that yes, your contract was signed under duress, and secondly, there's proof. Tom provided evidence that they were saying, we're not going to promote your record unless you partake in things that we tell you to partake in. And so they're saying that they're not performing their services but under duress. So we'll perform our services, but only if you do these kinds of things. And then it wasn't long after that so the judge awarded Tom Petty his masters, and very few, the rights to his master recordings, very few artists in the history of rock and roll music have ever been that fortunate. And then, you know who another one was, Mark? Was Frank Zappa. Frank had a similar situation, took his original manager to court, and it was heard in court, and a similar verdict was given, and Frank was given control of his master recordings, which is why the Zappa Family Trust are the only ones that are capable of re-releasing a Zappa album, is because Frank came to own his masters, which very few artists do. The publishing
Prince and George Michael were battling with Sony and Warner Brothers to try and get control of their master tapes as well, and we know how it ended for both of those, if you buy the official story anyway.
Exactly. And so you have to start taking a hard look at George Michael's music, and you start to look at his music, and oh my gosh, sure enough, he's writing about Christ consciousness and the raising of the chrism oil. And so then all the stories that we're hearing about what a sick degenerity is, how true is that when the cabal, everything they do is a lie, and that the mainstream media is not news, it's not truth. It's just an arm of the cabal to make them look good and to make their enemies look horrific. And anyone who they've taken apart and dismantled, you have to take a hard look at. On one of our shows the other night, Mark, just a quick segue into John McTiernan, Hollywood film director. He did Predator, where the hunters become the hunted, where Schwarzenegger turns the table on this alien predator and begins to hunt him. That's what's happening now. And John McTiernan also did The Hunt for Red October, and which is also, essentially in the movie, taking steps to take down these evil plans of the cabal to just create a constant state of fear. And so when you look at the personal story of John McTiernan, John McTiernan ended up going to prison. So this is one of the most successful, biggest Hollywood producer directors, and they were spying on him on his Hollywood set. And McTiernan had to hire a company who were sweeping the set daily for audio and video devices, and they found a whole shitload of them. And then McTiernan asked this company if they could turn the tables on these Hollywood production offices and maybe bug them so he could hear what these fuckers are thinking and talking about. And they said that they could do it. And when they did it, they revealed it to the Hollywood production offices, and who then went and got the police, and a large criminal investigation was done, and John McTiernan spent years in prison. So, and he did 2 of the Die Hard movies, and so you have to take a hard look at John McTiernan's catalog of films and see that these are films that are pointing out the cabal, and that they are leading towards this movement, this plan to take down the cabal, whether you want to believe it or not. And so Tom Petty is right in that same. Frank Zappa was right in that same thing. And how did Frank go out? Frank went out young with throat cancer. Now did he, or was somebody poisoning him to death? And everybody knows that you look at Frank's interviews in the last 2 years of his death, Frank was not mincing any words. He was telling anyone, if you look at those videos, he was telling anyone who wanted to listen who was in charge, what they were doing, what the purpose was, and it was to control minds to whatever end, to whatever outcome. So that's Tom Petty. So if you just knew more about Tom Petty, if you knew Tom Petty's history and saw that those first 2 albums so angered the cabal that it was all-out war over that 3rd album, then you'd think differently. And when he did the video for Don't Come Around Here No More, again, he's not showing you that he is a partaker of adrenochrome. He's showing you, because he can, that this is what these fuckers are doing, and this is largely what the music industry is about. and then you know more about Tom's songs, you see that album after album after album, he was calling out the Cabal, and then his spiritual songs were all raising Jesus Christ. It was all raising the chrism oil and Christed energy, or celebrating the sacred feminine. So that's Tom Petty. And when you put, this is what I've shared with you, and this is what I'm sharing with my audience and your listeners. When you really do the work, instead of taking just a passing glance at this, and you really dig deep, and you're going into song after song, album after album, and then you can begin to make judgments, because you're seeing massive trends, you're seeing absolute certainties. And when you see that these bands, like the band America, so divine, just every song is just so beautifully divine about this sacred story, you see that there are these bands that are doing nothing but creating divinity. How can they be evil if all they write about? So when all of this was started by Mark saying, but the Cabal does things in plain sight, and that's true. But like I used with the example of The Simpsons, you never know with the Cabal when it's going to be the truth. So they always say to you, see, we put it in the truth. But it's like, dude, I had to watch 3 years of shit before that show came on, and then I'm supposed to know that show is the truth, and then the last 3 years was complete bullshit?
No, you're right. In these presentations I did at the weekend, I was talking about 9/11 predictive programming symbolism in record sleeves and such. And I gave a couple of examples. One was Party Music, an album by a rap group called The Coup, that world famous multi-million selling group that we've all heard of, The Coup. And then another one was by a group called the Almighty RSO, who sold about 7 copies of their album. So these are really obscure records that only very few people are going to ever have seen. So it's not like they'll put it on an album that they know is going to sell 100 million. They tuck it away on some obscure little thing that they know hardly anyone is going to see, but they still feel that they've absolved their obligation to creation by putting it out there somehow. So as you say, they put it in the most unlikely places. And people watch The Simpsons thinking that it's going to be a lot of goofy nonsense, and they put on Fox News or MSNBN and think they're getting the truth of what's going on in the world, whereas in fact the opposite is the case. You get the lies and the fantasy from the news, and you get the truth communicated in goofy cartoons, but how the hell are you supposed to know that?
Exactly. You can't possibly know. And remember, it was The Simpsons that long ago was encoding Trump running for president, and then that's why people are saying, well, Trump clearly is Cabal. No, they knew, because he said on Larry King Live 3 days after John F. Kennedy Jr. died that he would run eventually for president. And they hated Donald Trump. They always have, because they don't have anything on Donald Trump. That's what you need to wrap your minds around. They hate and attack whom they don't own. That's why largely adrenochrome exists, because it is the worst. And if somebody is partaking in adrenochrome, there is no room for forgiveness. And that's how you own people. You have to force them into doing the worst possible things, and that's called ownership. It's not about blackmail, it's about ownership. And that's how you own people, when you have them on film doing the worst things that there's no forgiveness for. So this is that ownership. And so Simpsons is showing Trump running for president in the future and winning, because this is their worst nightmare. And then what do they show? That they assassinate Trump. that they're gonna kill Trump. So the code being, if you try and run, you orange-haired fucker, we're gonna shoot you. We're gonna gun you down if you attempt to try and bring us down. And that's
how
how
assassinated Prince on The Simpsons, didn't they?
Absolutely. So you go back and look at this, and it's just all-out war between what is good and bad. So I want to stress this again. For all those that don't believe in whatever you want to call it, white hats, Q, whatever you do or don't want to, understand, know this, absolutely know this, then that would be understanding, is this. there is a group of goodly people in this world. Colleen and I and Mark being three of them, and we are all in with seeing these demons brought to justice, whatever it takes. That's why Mark has worked as hard. That's why he works as hard as he does, raising a family, having his job, writing those books, going on his speaking tours, doing everything he's done, because he's all in with seeing these efforts taken down. And Colleen and I are no different. We work, I barely sleep just trying to get these things done. So that's because there's a group of good people that are not part of this evil, and they have been working behind the scenes. Now, if everyone just listens to the mainstream media, if you think that, if you're going to find out what's going on in the world or the weather, you turn on the Weather Channel or you turn on the news to find out, you're lost. I am sorry for being the one to have to burst your bubble, but you're lost if you think any of that stuff is true. But the problem is with a group of good people, if you attempt to say things, the weight of the media turns against you, and that's what the vast majority believe in. This is the problem. That's why Trump in 2016 can't come out in 2017 and say, this is it, we have the evidence. Because half the population would have said, you faked that evidence. There's no way Hillary Clinton is a bad person. She's my hero. And what would the average person have said about Oprah Winfrey or Ellen DeGeneres? They would have said to you, oh my God, Oprah's the nicest person in the whole world. No, here she's eating a child. Watch. No, but I can't really tell the quality.
Tom Hanks, lovely guy.
Oh man, he plays the greatest roles in all Hollywood movies. He's the nicest guy because he plays the nicest roles. No one would believe. So why, I know you don't want to get into this stuff, but let me just quickly say it because it's important to say, and it does tie into what we're talking about. Why the movie? Why are we living a movie? Because you can't be told this truth. Because we're so far gone in the lies because of this effing mainstream media. You cannot be told the truth. You have to see it to believe it. And you're seeing it and you've had to feel it. And there are people that are going, but it's mean, it's cruel, it's unfair because they could have saved lives. They could have. We would have been in an all-out war with the zombies, with the zombie apocalypse, which is what Hollywood has been encoding to us for the longest time. The zombies will side with the devils who made them zombies instead of those people who are attempting to wake them up. They will attack and eat the living. God is the God of the living, not of the dead. They will eat the living instead of other dead. And this is all symbology of why we're living what we're living. You need to take a deep breath and to process what I'm sharing with you. We have been so lied to. We have been so attacked. World War III is what happened the day after they defeated Adolf Hitler. The wrong guy. What did General Patton say just weeks after the official end to World War II? He said, we attacked the wrong people. He said, I'm working day to day with these Germans and these so-called Nazis. He said they are the most capable and goodly and godly people I've ever encountered. We should have been attacking the demons. 2 days later, after making that statement, he was almost killed by a runaway ox cart. And then a week after that, General Patton was dead. If he is dead. But he was dead after making those comments. Adolf Hitler was a good guy. World War II is a complete lie. We attacked the wrong people. So this is why I'm bringing this up. Everything we have been lied to. Mark has shared with you his thoughts about flat Earth. I know it. With every breath that I have within me, I absolutely know that there is a firmament and we live upon the level truth, the level way. And we have been lied to about the core things. So if somebody came along who just happened to win an election and half the people hate and half the people are like, then it just would have been all-out war with those people that all they do is they believe in the lies. And they're prepared to attack the truth tellers. Mark would have had to be on the run. Mark Devlin would have had to have been on the run for saying the things that he's been saying.
I'm going to put this show out with a reference to Adolf Hitler being one of the good guys. I'm going to be on the run from that. I'm going to be kicked off of YouTube anyway.
But I guarantee you that that's the truth. I've done a massive video. Of course, it's not on YouTube, but you can find it on LBRY TV, and it's the incredible truth about Adolf Hitler's Germany. And of course, if you haven't seen Dennis Wise's The Greatest Story Never Told, which is 6 hours, or Europa, which is 9 hours, The Greatest Story Never Told, Europa, Hellstorm, the documentary Hellstorm, and then mine, The Truth About Adolf Hitler, Charlie Freaks, The Truth About Adolf Hitler and His Germany, which is on LBRY. You can find all of them, I think, on LBRY TV or BitChute. And that's the absolute truth. That's the absolute truth. So World War II, a complete lie, and people are going, yeah, no, seriously, Trump, you should have just come out and, arrested all these people and executed all these people, and everyone would have been, totally on your side. No, they wouldn't have. That's not Oprah in that video. You can't tell me Oprah's. That's not Hillary in that. Hillary Clinton is the greatest politician ever. She's just, she's trying to break the glass ceiling.
What is frustrating about being told that it's all a movie and people have to be shown, you can't just tell them, you've got to show them, is for those of us that have been walking this path for several years already, and we're already battle weary. We're tired. We're exhausted. We've been doing this work. We've been trying to wake people up for years already. And now we have to sit through this monumental, never-ending shit show along with all the zombie morons and sit there biding our time and waiting for something to happen when we're already fit to drop from exhaustion from having put the work in. That's kind of frustrating, I'm finding.
Absolutely. And that's why Colleen and I have nothing but love and sympathy and empathy for you, Mark, because we know that everything you just said is the truth. Just like Colleen and I, we are exhausted. We don't need to see this movie, and we don't need to have our family and our animals put at risk, or our house put at risk, for blasting tunnels and taking down this evil group and stuff. But it's the price we have to pay. And Mark is no different than my years in school, which I hated, because those of us that wanted to learn and wanted to go wherever the truth led us, we're always held back. You're always held back in any avenue of organized society. You're always held back because the vast majority are so asleep, they're not interested in doing any work. And so the pace of every class slows down. The amount of any truth ever shared or told slows down. Everything. It's a dumbing down. And so this has been happening to you and ourselves our entire lives. They have been dumbing down those that want to save the world and change the world and to learn what can be learned and to make a difference, and they have been dumbing us down. For the vast majority are asleep. That's the allegory of allegories here. So we get it 100%, and we get your frustration 100%. You don't need to be taught a lesson. You're the one out there on the front lines.
Yeah, right. We just want this whole thing to be over. All right, so we got a few topical references in there. We went to some different places, but just getting back to these artists and this incredible spiritual, metaphysical information that they encoded into their songs. Just where do you feel these artists are getting this information from? I think I put this question to you in one of our previous shows, but again, it bears revisiting. Do you suspect it's the teachings of secret society and mystery school fraternities to which they might belong, possibly due to the families that they come out of? So we're down to their true nature again there. Or do you feel they may have just learnt it for themselves, in which case, where did such young men and women, because they were in their early to mid 20s for the most part. Where do young people like that get access to such arcane teachings in the decades before the internet? We're talking 1960s, 1970s. They would have had to have gone to these really obscure libraries and dug out these old books and spent hours poring over this information. Where did they get all this stuff from? How were they privy to all this?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and we addressed it on our live show the other night, which was the truth about the 60s and the hippies. So essentially, after World War II, came this plan to dumb down the world, and in particular America. So you had this homogenized culture created, epitomized, say, in a show like Leave It to Beaver, and Mrs. Beaver, Mrs. Cleaver, is wearing, a lovely dress with pearls and her high-heeled shoes in the kitchen, because that's all a woman does, is they dress up to go in a kitchen and work preparing food in a kitchen all day long. And the father is never around because he's working, and then the two boys get into endless trouble because they have no guidance in their life, and that you hope at the end of the day that the godly energy that is within all of us is enough to keep them from committing suicide, which, by the way, is the second leading cause of death and has been since the 1970s for our youth is suicide. So this is the sort of sick reality. So in the 50s came a group I referenced earlier, and it's very important to know this, everyone. In the 50s came a group called the Freaks. Charlie Freak, this is where the name comes from, is because the Freaks were the first to stand up after the bullshit of World War II and say, I'm not believing any of this stuff. And then you see the Freaks got hijacked because of the likes of Jack Kerouac and always Allen Ginsberg, and always the famous ones, the ones that get to go on the Sunday political talk shows, and they're the representatives of this this youthful community teaching the truth as beatniks in a coffee house, and they just happen to be on NBC on Sunday morning speaking, representing for the youth of America. It's bullshit. But at the heart and soul of the hippie movement were the Freaks. And the Freaks were saying it's all a fucking lie, and that we can't trust government, and that what they were talking about is a world of community where we work together in families, and it's smaller units, and that you can never have large government because it's always leading swine to the trough, and they will abuse their privileges if you let swine to the trough. And so that's the Freaks, and the Freaks are the birth of the hippies of the 60s. That's why Frank Zappa ripped to shreds the fake hippies. And that's why Frank targeted San Francisco, because San Francisco Haight-Ashbury hippies were not hippies. San Francisco is a Kabbalistic, is a CIA town, just like Mexico City is a CIA town.
Ashbury, what's in the name?
Haight, that's right. And ash, just like an ash ram is the Lamb of God risen, which is Jesus Christ, and the ash is the burnt offering of the perfect Lamb, which is Jesus Christ, which is the baptism of fire to raise ourselves into heaven upon earth. They hate Jesus Christ. They hate God. They hate Mother Earth. They hate life. And that's why they teach us to be Death Eaters. And if you're partaking in that, I'm not judging you. I'm not angry at you. I'm just saying, when you know better, you have to do better. If you want to live, you eat life. If you want to die, you eat death. You're a Death Eater, because they teach you to be Death Eaters, and that's what they give you with their books and their movies. It's just bullshit. It's lies. It's death. They're constantly filling us up with death when we need to have life. So this is the truth. So the true hippies, like Frank Zappa said, you go to Los Angeles and you'll see the true hippies, and he said they'll get in your face and let you know the truth, and they don't care about their hair, and they don't care about their clothes, and they're not wearing beads. These are the real hippies. But he said you don't ever see anyone doing a story about Los Angeles hippies. They're the ones that were getting beaten to death by the LA Gestapo, which is not Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, not a bad. The Gestapo is the Zionist fake Jews. They call themselves Jews, and they're the fake Jews. and they're the Nazis, and they are the Gestapo, and the Gestapo tactics of the LA police beating on these kids. None of that made the news. None of that made the news. That was the real hippies being beaten to death, while these fake hippies. So, great story about the fake hippies. George Harrison heard so much about these hippies in Haight-Ashbury and the magic that was going on there. George said, I got to go and check this out, because this could be the revolution that George was hoping for as he was part of the Beatles. So this was the height of the Summer of Love. So this was the summer of '67. And George chartered a private jet, and he flew with his own little group or entourage, and he went to San Francisco, and he went straight to Haight-Ashbury. George Harrison stayed for an hour, and then told the limo to take him back to the airport, and he flew right back to London. And he said, that's all bullshit. He said, this was so disappointing, because he said it had nothing to do with love. It had nothing to do with truth. And George was out of there. And that's George Harrison calling out the fake hippies as well, which is why, by the way, Frank Zappa, who took shots at the Beatles many, many times, were only in it for the money, of course, parodying Sgt. Pepper's. But that's why Frank Zappa only ever had the nicest things to say about George Harrison. Frank Zappa loved George Harrison because he saw George Harrison as authentic. And so this is the reality, is that we're always shown the opposite of what is the truth. And so what the truth is, where are they getting this information, is that the beatniks were talking about this. And the beatniks were getting this from books and from secret clubs. And remember, Freemasonry in its origin is purely good. Where did the Freemasons come from? The Knights Templar. I know, Charlie, but the Knights Templar are evil. No, they're not. No, they're not. The Knights Templar were pure. These are the spiritual warriors of God who wore the armor of God, which is what Mark's doing, is what we're doing, putting ourselves at risk by telling this truth. We're protected by the armor of God that protects us, that surrounds us. When you stand up for the truth, when you stand up for goodly energy. Good is God. Evil is devil. It's as simple as that. So that's wearing the armor of God. And so a lot of these kids were also getting it because they had grandfathers, fathers, potentially grandfathers, great-grandfathers that had ties in Freemasonry. Real Freemasons teach this one story. That's why a Freemason temple is off limits to the average uninitiated, because it's too much, because it shows you flat earth. It shows you the truth about God and the sacred feminine and the Christed energy. It shows you the truth, which would blow people's minds if they're not ready for it. So this is the Freemasons that tie back to the Knights Templar, which ties back to the Gnostics, which ties back to the Essenes. The Essenes wrote the Old Testament of the Bible, largely. The Gnostics wrote the New Testament of the Bible, largely. So these are ancient peoples that are essentially the Knights Templar, that are essentially Freemasons. Look at the word Freemason. Why do they call themselves Freemason? Freemason means this: free ma son, free the mother's son. Freemasonry is to free the teachings of Jesus Christ, the truth of Jesus Christ. The teachings of Jesus Christ in the New Bible, as good as the Bhagavad Gita is, as incredible as the Buddha Sutras are, or the Quran. The Quran is, these ancient sacred scriptures are all so beautiful because they're all divining the one story. If all you did in your life is read the New Testament, the word of Jesus Christ, for yourself, and you lived it for yourself, don't let anybody else interpret it for you. You take the time and read it for yourself, because Jesus, while he never spoke but in parables, he made everything so clear. Parables make things really clear. They're allegories. They make it really clear what the message is. If you follow the teachings of what Jesus is accredited to in the Bible, you'll never go wrong. you'll never go wrong. We'll never have another problem in this world. It's that simple. So they were getting it from the Bible. They were getting it from one another. They were getting it from books that still existed in libraries. They were getting it from people who had ties to Freemasonry, which is dating back to the Knights Templar. They had people who were tapping into Eastern spirituality and were divining these things as well. So the sacred truths about the true story, the true nature of mankind, have existed forever. And in the 50s and the 60s, there were millions of us. Today, there are hundreds of us, if not thousands. Maybe there's 144,000. At times, Mark and I have talked, maybe the 144,000 is only 144. It feels like that at times, that only 144 people seem to know anything to do with the truth anymore. But that's the fact. There were more of them. And people say, but there was no internet. That's good because there's less lies. That's the whole point of the 50s and the 60s. There were less lies. There was less obfuscation. There was less programming. There was less TV. There was less radio. There was less TV. Remember, the radio stations were all owned by individuals, good people, Southern Christians. And they were playing Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley, who were just singing about God in their music. So it was infectious. This truth and this righteousness is infectious, and it was everywhere. And this is where they were getting it from. And then here's how it works within the industry. It's a small group. They all conjugated into the same area because that's what the record industry wanted. They wanted them in LA, which is, a source of devil worshiping and Satanism. So they want these beautiful kids close to temptation so they can catch them in sin. But when they got together, they began to talk and they began to share. And then when you know these stories and you know this truth, that's all you talk about. It's all that Colleen and I really talk about, is the miracle of God's creation. When you know this, you share it, and then others share it, and then you're teaching them, and they're teaching another group of people, and it just grows. And that's what you found, and that's why the music industry in the 1970s was all out war, because the Cabal didn't realize how fast this rolling the rock was overtaking rock and roll, and it was all out war.
Do you feel these artists were having to encode this knowledge, these teachings, cryptically, obscurely into their lyrics so that they had to fly under the radar? Because if the average record company executive got wind of what they were trying to put across, they would just shut it down. So they had to do it obscurely. It's a bit like watching a Stanley Kubrick movie. Stanley layered his films. So you had the surface narrative for the mainstream, the profane masses. But if you dug 4 or 5 levels below, you get so much esoteric teaching there, particularly in Eyes Wide Shut. And The Shining come to that. So it seems these artists were doing something similar. They were having to cryptically encode it to throw their overlords off the track.
That's right. I mean, The Shining pissed everybody off, because nobody on the surface, nobody could understand why Kubrick so dismantled the novel. Well, because Kubrick knew who wrote the novel and what it stood for, what it really stood for, the Overlook Hotel, and what really is going on. It's encoded everywhere in the story, everywhere. And after that, Kubrick was a marked man. That's why the next film was, way off base to keep him alive, kind of thing. So that Kubrick was not killed. That Kubrick was taken out by good people. And that's why Kubrick had the balls to do Eyes Wide Shut. And that's why he had Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, who neither can act. Kubrick's making the best movies ever. Why would he have 2 Hollywood rats act in this incredible production? Because this is his last go, and he knew it was his last go, and he's encoding in plain sight who literally is involved and what you're really literally looking at. Nicole Kidman's not a woman, And boy, that's an entire show to itself. If you want me to go there, let me tell you, there's more famous women through the 70s, 80s, 90s, right up to now. There's more famous women that are actually men than there are famous women that are women. Like, I'm not kidding you. There's more transvestite or transgender, these fake women, Farrah Fawcett, Shire. It just goes on and on and on.
Makes me feel very sick thinking about all the celebrities that I used to lust over when I was a young lad, and they may not have been quite what I thought they were. It makes me feel very nauseous.
Bo Derek, the perfect 10, which all women should try and look like, but you can't because it's a guy and you're a woman. You're supposed to look like a woman, and they've got you buying into Victoria's Secret. What's Victoria's Secret? Not one of the Victoria's Secret models ever was a woman. They're all guys. All the Victoria's Secret models are guys. That's Victoria's Secret, which then tells you who was Queen Victoria, one of the ugliest women you've ever seen in your entire life.
And then there's Mick Obama.
The Baphomet who really ran the White House, 44. If you know your numerology, he's the 44th president. 4 and 4 is the separation of 8. 8 is the eternal unity between mother and father, magnetism, eternal life in the glory of God. 4 is the separation between God and the mother, and 9/11 is symbolizing removing God. And then COVID on March 11, 3/11 of 2020 is symbolizing getting rid of the mother, and then that leaves us as orphans. And we all know what Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation does to orphans in villages all over this earth.
Is it possible that these artists that we've been speaking about here, these visionary musicians, could have achieved a lot of this information through meditative practices, through personal meditation?
Thank you for saying that. I didn't say that because I didn't know if your audience would go there with me, but so Mark asked the question earlier, how do I know? How does Colleen and I know? We haven't been told by anyone. We're not connected to anyone. We have 0 military connections. We have 0 family connections to anyone or anything. We only know this because we're good at meditation, and I don't know why I am, but I think it's because I have such a low heart rate that I can drop into meditation virtually at any time, anywhere, and I'm in a deep meditative state. And this is where most of, and I've hid that or protected that for the first few years, because I don't think people would have considered it possible. But largely, where most of my gnosis comes from, it just comes from downloads in meditation. I cannot stress this to you enough. This is, and if you know about meditation, you practice meditation, you see how it ties into level Earth. The Earth has to be still and stationary. The Earth has never moved, and it never will. It is still for a very powerful, powerful reason. There's a dome, just like your head, right? Like I always teach, the sphenoid bone is the level Earth, and this is the dome. So the flat Earth concept is right here inside your head. It's a hermetic principle, always the hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without, as you.
Pineal gland in the place of the North Pole in the center, right?
Exactly, and that's where you align it to with when you change your breathing, change your eating, and you begin to meditate and take no thought. Jesus Christ, take no thought for your life. Take no thought of that left dying brain, that carnal monster that wants to consume you, that ego that will eat you up and spit you out. And the ego works for the Cabal because it's just pure evil. And then heaven on earth is the right hemisphere of your brain. It is. It's what all the Bible teaches, is cast thy net to the right, because the right hemisphere of your brain is heaven, the left is hell. This is the one story, and this is what is the truth and what we need to do. And that's why these monsters are left brain carnal monsters, and they're Canaanites. And that's why the story of Cain and Abel come from Adam and Eve. So we're at the top of the pyramid in this genealogy, this story. At the very beginning, they're showing you what happened. Cain, the left brain, murdered and ate Abel. How do you know that Cain ate Abel? Where do you think the word cannibal comes from? Cain, Abel, cannibal. Cain ate Abel. Cain ate Abel, cannibal. Cannibal is Cain ate Abel. And this is why, if you stay in your left brain, it'll end up you're eating children. This is why there's human DNA in Taco Time burritos and McDonald's hamburgers. Everywhere you look and everywhere you go, it's human DNA, human food, because they want us to become carnal Canaanite monsters as well. So
that's why Beyonce in her song sang "To the left, to the left,"
which Mark decoded, and it's just brilliant. When we did the video on the Black Eye Club, where were they all being socked in the eye? It's the left eye. It's to draw attention to the left eye. So here's the thing. We don't know who was punching them in the left eye, because it could have been the white hats to draw attention, showing you that these are Canaanites, or it could be themselves or that club, the Fight Club, because they're exalting what they are, which is their left eye. And those people who are in those pictures with the black eyes, you didn't see Michael Jackson with the black left eye. You didn't see Prince with the black left eye. So there were still some good ones, but they became far and few after 1982. 82 was the demarcation between heaven on earth and hell on earth. And out from there on, it was just flat out hell on earth. And then one of the greatest things that Mark Devlin has done, and this is really important because this is brainwashing 101, is Mark, because of his experience with the electronic age and this rise of the DJ, and then all of these huge festivals surrounding this godlike or this Christ-like figure who's the DJ, and they're all handing out ecstasy to everyone, right? Kind of sounds like, acid and these fake hippies and stuff, and
or wafers in communion,
or wafers in communion. Good Lord! And and Mark came along and said that these guys were just creating light shows and music that was just putting you into a trance, and then they were just saying key words and saying certain things, and there was just brainwashing 100,000 people live in these shows, and they were all in a trance, taking ecstasy. So they're in a trance-like state, and then they're being prepped. Their brain is being prepped, and then the messages were being sent. And then what did Mark?
It's even called trance. That's the name of the genre.
Exactly. And then what did Mark show you? Suddenly, by 2010, all of these DJs were being knighted by the Queen. Why? Job well done. You programmed entire generations of kids. Meditation takes you out of that world. And when you meditate, and by the way, like all those people, the hippies that we were talking about on the show, meditation was huge to them because they weren't in cities. They lived off the countryside. They didn't put their kids into school. They were on the countryside. When you're in the countryside, it's quiet and calm and still, and everyone was meditating. You look at all the songs from all of these greatest artists, they're all speaking to meditation. So they were all meditating, and this is largely where, and of course, then they're having their own experiences of raising the chrism oil within you, because anybody can do it, but you have to be righteous to be able to raise that which is right.
All right, Charlie. So we've covered Adolf Hitler was a good guy, fake Jews, Freemasons, Flat Earth, Donald Trump, Q, Paul McCartney. It might be the most controversial show on the internet.
Yay! But it's the truth. And And so I'm very, very excited for the weeks and months that are ahead of us. I know it's been a long, hard go for everyone. But once again, I will continue to tell you the same thing, which is what I know from my inner core, that the evil has been rid. We are watching something that is very necessary, and it's not fun to watch, it's not fun to go through, but it's necessary, and what's coming on the other side will blow you away in the most beautiful, positive ways. I guarantee it. Guarantee it.
And we're not doing dates. We don't do dates.
No, because they have to turn on their own dates all the time, because they're dealing with the zombie apocalypse. They're dealing with people who are asleep, and I'm sure that they thought this jab thing would wake people up. But I mean, what happened just the last number of days in Australia is very, very, very positive, very exciting, because the Aussies are now grouping in large numbers, and they are blasting through police lines, and they're going where they want to. And the last thing I'll just add on the show, Mark, and Mark is a huge believer, supporter in the innate genius of the Aboriginals of this earth. You know, the leaders of this movement to strength and freedom in Australia has been the Aboriginal community, which has come forward and has shown the police to the borders of their land, and they said, we do not accept the sovereignty of the Queen here. You have no legal right to be here at all, and you will get off our property. And so the Aboriginals have done that. They have kept the police off of these slave lands that have they've been forced onto. And what they've done is they've reached out to this truth community in Australia, and they've said, you come here, you come stay with us. And if you're afraid for your sovereignty, you're a sovereign being here. And it's amazing, because the same people that sold the Aboriginals down the road to a corrupt and vile government in Australia that slaughtered them and took away what was their possession, the same people that turned a blind eye, the Aboriginals are now reaching out to with love, care, and compassion. And they're not going, we're angry at you for selling us out. They're going, no, we're going to help you. And this is what we all need to do for one another, is we need to help. So at the heart and soul of what is happening in Australia right now, the strength is coming through the Aboriginals, which is so beautiful. And guess what? They meditate. That's what they do. They meditate. They connect to the Father and the Mother through meditation.
And there's another misleading term, Aboriginals, which, when you break down the etymology of it, means anti-original, not original, which is a satanic inversion of what they are.
Absolutely. And I won't go into it. It'll take too long. But yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, Mark.
Well, thank you, brother. And it was great to have a conversation with you again and catch up with you. And just appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your insights into things.
This is just for fun.
Vibrations, I'm picking up. Vibrations, I'm picking up. Vibrations, I'm picking up. Vibrations.
Ah!